Today's guest is Sarah Moore, the founder and lead designer behind Sarah Catherine Designs, a Birmingham, Alabama based interior design firm known for what she calls casually elevated, livable interiors. Her work blends Southern style with comfort functionality and the kind of timeless beauty that feels collected rather than decorated, and it's a philosophy that has earned features in Southern living, country living, Nashville interiors, and more. After studying interior design at Auburn University and beginning her career in Nashville, Sarah eventually founded her own firm. Since then, she has grown a team serving clients across the country, helping families create homes that don't just look beautiful but become the backdrop for everyday life. This is my conversation with Sarah Moore. Welcome to Grandma's Silver, where tradition meets today. I'm Allie, your host of the Grandma Silver podcast and founder of the Grand Millennial Lifestyle. Here, we blend aesthetics with nostalgia, engaging in conversations with lifestyle brands, designers, and more to rediscover the timeless charm of the past. Join me as we journey from home to heart, illuminating the past and polishing the present with the gleam of Grandma Silver. Well, Sarah, I'm excited to speak with you today. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited too.
Could you introduce yourself, tell people who you are and what you do and what we're talking about today?
My name is Sarah. I run the interior design firm that's based out of Birmingham. We serve clients nationwide called Sarah Catherine Design. My middle name is Catherine. We do high-end residential interiors. So we work on, you know, furniture packages and interiors only. We also work on luxury new construction as well as luxury renovations, like major renovations. I have a ton of experience, both, of course, with the pretty fun part, like paint colors and wallpaper and pulling furniture and lamps and fabric and all, but we work very regularly and very heavily in construction, like I said, be it new construction or renovations.
How did we get into this?
Okay, I trust my mom and believe my mom, but I don't really have memory of this. She says that I came home from school in the 10th grade and was like, I think I'm going to be an interior designer. And that would have been, like 2002. And so pre-Pinterest, pre-Instagram, I mean, Trading Spaces was on TV. I grew up, my mom never used a designer, so I don't really know. Like, I didn't have exposure to it. And I will say social media, pre-Instagram,
Who really
Pinterest.
did at that point,
It was
like
like the design magazine. Of course, like you walk through the grocery store and like House Beautiful was around. This younger generation, the newer generation, has a lot more access to knowing what interior design is and what it entails. And so my mom, I can't really tell her where I got this idea, except that it is authentic that I always was a very creative kid. Always loved to do art, where my sister just wanted to like play a game, play with her toys. I was more like, what kind of art project can we do? And or even playing Barbies with my sister or my friends. I would spend hours building Barbie's house, and anything in the playroom was up for grabs. So that bowl from the play kitchen, yeah, it's a bowl, but it's also Barbie's hot tub. Probably wasn't like this out of left field announcement in the 10th grade, but I really don't have memory of having some moment at school that made me come home and say that. And so the reason it's funny between my mom is, again, less knowledge of the field. Also, I just think that there were fewer jobs in the field back then because there was less awareness of it. So you really kind of only like the elite top percent of people would be like, I'm hiring an interior designer to like build my custom home. I come home in 10th grade, I'm gonna be an interior designer. And she was like, the reason it stuck out in my mind is because I was like, oh gosh, is she ever gonna have a job? And I'm like, thanks a lot, Mom. Here now my name's on the door. I proved you wrong, I guess. I grew up an Auburn fan, so I always wanted to go to Auburn anyway. I got very lucky that this niche field I wanted to go into, Auburn had like, I think it was the number 3 in the country design school at the
Wow.
time. My very first college class, it wasn't this whole freshman year, just knock out your core classes. I like the first time my butt was in a seat at Auburn was a design course. And it
Wow.
was like off to the races. Yeah. From Auburn went to Nashville because I graduated like right kind of on the back end of the 2008-9 recession. Jobs were hard to come by, and I got a job with an architect firm in Nashville. So I actually started my career in commercial design, working on a lot more like hospital buildings, offices, like big kind of corporate settings. It was a great job, especially given the fact that I had a lot of peers who were just kind of taking what they can get. I felt very lucky to be at a well-established place, but working on hospital waiting rooms wasn't really the dream. And I'm not saying it's less creative, it's a different type of creativity where
Yeah.
you're really focused on codes. And anybody who's ever been in a hospital, is so easy to get turned around. Well, subtly, the interior design is floor one is blue, floor two is yellow, floor three is green. And so you can like remember, oh, this wasn't the floor I just came off of. And you don't even know that you know that, but you do. So there's stuff like that. So I eventually got a job working for a residential designer, being her junior designer. And that was chef's kiss, like totally what I wanted to be doing in Nashville. I feel like really learned and crafted my skill doing that. Although I definitely came into that job with some skills, thankfully, from the commercial job. Left that job, went out on my own. It would be unethical, but also just not very possible to start a design business while working for another designer. Like, one, that's such a conflict of interest, and two, it's just like like you just wouldn't have the bandwidth to really take on a client project of your own while still like reporting for duty where you were. So it's very much a clean break. Like, left that job and was like, I don't have any clients. How am I going to pay rent next month? But little by little, like clients started calling and the jobs were small and I would take anything. Like,
Hmm.
oh, your budget is like a wing and a prayer. I'm in, let's figure it out. A couple years into that, I have did not grow up in Birmingham, but my family is all from Birmingham. So my whole life, Birmingham was kind of home base for like aunts, uncles, grandparents. Oh man, I loved Nashville. It was so hard to leave, but it was just kind of starting to look ahead and be like, the longer I stay up here, my business grows, harder to cut ties with and move closer to family if that is something I want down the road, like in my 30s. I think I knew in the future I'd want to be in Birmingham, but at the time was still like rocking and rolling in Nashville. The happy accident of it, again, I thought, well, my business isn't too big to move it. So what I'll do is I'll move to Birmingham. I'll take a million odd jobs just like I did a couple years ago. The clients I've got going in Nashville, I mean, projects don't just wrap up. Projects go on for months at a time. So even though I was moving now, I was in the middle of projects that would continue till next spring to finish.
Yeah.
And Birmingham's 3 hours from Nashville, so I can scoot up the road if I need to. And the happy accident of it all is like my word of mouth in Nashville continued. So I still to this day will pick up Nashville projects.
How would you describe your design style?
I would describe my style as kind of a elevated, fresh take on classic Southern interiors. I love Southern style, but of course, if we're doing like the home we did in Colorado, it didn't need to look like this Southern cute Mountain Brook, Alabama home that you just dropped into Denver. Or same thing if you're working down at the beach. That influence from Southern culture, Southern hospitality, Southern historic style, but then let's elevate it and let's freshen it up. Let's do a fun pop of color. Let's add pattern and like fresh fabrics, fresh pattern, but then also let's put a fringe on something that kind of is a nod to what's been around and timeless forever. Very trying to make something feel very now and current and happy and interesting, but also kind of very timeless at the same time. I would not consider myself a maximalist by any means, but I definitely love layered interiors, layered details, paneling down a hallway. Think about lightly renovating my own home right now. And I told the builder that I wanted to do dentil crown molding. And he had the hardest time sourcing it because he's like, nobody makes this anymore. And I told him, I go, it's making a comeback. I want it in my living room, but mark my words, you're going to be ordering this more and more. Maybe I will be proven wrong, but I'm seeing it more and more is the reason that I'm predicting that, and so that would be a very timeless detail, that kind of went out for a bit, but let's bring it back, but let's do it in a cool, fresh way and do some sort of fun wall color or wallpaper with it.
Well, and I wanted to ask a little bit more about, because I do feel like our environment and our experiences kind of influence a lot of the style that we develop. So I'm curious about, I know you said you're in Birmingham now, but you had family there. Where were you located growing up?
I grew up in Marietta, Georgia. Both my parents are from the Birmingham area, but then my dad's job had us in Marietta, so we were the outliers. But we were in Marietta, and I mean, great, like loved it there and all, but we were always like the family coming to Birmingham to visit for any kind of family get together.
There's a lot of history there. Like there's a lot of older historic homes, right?
Yeah, I mean, same goes with Birmingham. One of the things I think that I was absorbing as a kid growing up without maybe even meaning to, both in Marietta as well as coming back and forth to Birmingham a lot, is the way Marietta and like a lot of the metro Atlanta areas are set up is there's neighborhoods, more like cul-de-sac, designated neighborhoods, as opposed to a Birmingham area where it's like, you call it a neighborhood, but it's like the area of Homewood and it's just a collection of like streets that people live on in this kind of area zone. And so I kind of had both of those two things. And in my neighborhood, it was a lot of like a mix of houses that had been there and then new construction houses, but they were all very custom homes. So as a kid, I grew up in this neighborhood of custom homes. And one of the things that I even can think back on now is I remember this would be a house that was built in the last couple of years, but it didn't look that way. It wasn't like some of my friends' neighborhoods. You'd have a builder or a developer go in and build a whole neighborhood worth of houses. And so there would be kind of a similar thread to those houses. They maybe weren't all identical, but there was very like reoccurring finishes, reoccurring patterns. And even to this day, I think there is something that is so impressive about renovation or new construction when it can tap into classic historic details, like those details that are timeless, that have stood the test of time, that you're not in 10 years necessarily going to look at that house and go, wow, that's such a 2010 house. That's such a 90s home,
Yeah.
and you can drive around Birmingham, for instance, and there are 70s homes that if they were on trend in the 70s, it is like unmistakable. But then there's a lot of homes, like my grandmother's house was this really pretty big brick house, and it was very classic, and it was probably built in like the 60s, so not far off from that. You wouldn't necessarily peg it that way. It just looks like a classic brick home, especially with builds, like something that, give the house an identity, but tap into things that have stood the test of time. No two houses need to like have all the same details, but I think there's ways that you can live in a home for 20 years and it doesn't have to look like the year you built it. So I think I was able to be around a lot of that. Marietta grew because Atlanta had a boom in the 90s, and so there was a lot of like pre-existing, but then there was a lot of new stuff going up, kind of the way Nashville like became while I lived up there. I think being back and forth between the two cities, I got to see a lot of history in Birmingham, and then I got to see this neighborhood went up, and I don't like the fact that it kind of looks like a developer developed the whole thing at once. But then my neighborhood, like my neighbors, no house looks the same because they're all custom and different. And like that, my next door neighbor's house was featured in a bunch of magazines and stuff when I was a kid. And of course, that was kind of lost on me, but I can look back and be like, of course, I totally see it. Like that house was beautiful, like white columns, all kinds of like green ivy everywhere. And I'm like, I would still move into that house and be proud of it, this many years later.
I'm in the Philadelphia suburbs. We have a ton of developments just getting plopped up everywhere, like on all of the available land. I'm sure that's not a unique problem that I'm having. We call them like the cookie cutter houses because like all you're really customizing is like what countertop do you want? And if you want this one, it's an upgrade. It's they're not
And a lot of
really
those are
special.
packaged. If you
Yeah,
pick
yeah.
this countertop, you get these bathrooms with it.
Right. They're not custom. They're not personal. They're barely personal because we do have so many historic houses around here. I love the details of those when you're doing something that's custom. What is the relationship that you have with the builder?
The best homes have a good architect behind them. I think so often like there's a misconception of like, I'm going to hire my architect, work with my architect, get my plans done. And then like when those are close to done, call my interior designer. And I can't stress enough, like the sooner the better. If you think you're going to work with a designer, call early. Like one, a lot of times we have a wait list. Again, it's that trying to not spread me and my team too thin. So if you call me in the summer, I might not be able to start your project till the fall. And I'm not the only designer that has that kind of ongoing schedule. It's not all the time. I mean, certainly there's times that clients call me and I'm like, yeah, I am actively taking new projects right now. The best projects that really turn out the most attention to detail is when you're not slicing and dicing entities. So you're not like, okay, architect, and then when the architect's done, I'll call the designer. And then obviously me and the builder overlap, but putting me in touch with your builder directly, and I'm not going to go like make choices without the client, but there is going to be things that like the client doesn't understand the terminology or the
Hmm.
client has never answered this question before. Like there's so many details that go into any kind of renovation or build that like if you don't do this, you just don't know that that question is coming. And you're probably not thinking about wanting an outlet right here next to the whatever because you want that to be your drop zone when you walk in the door. I say so often, interior design, building, architecture, there are absolutely details in a build that if we do our job well, it is going to be stunning, chef's kiss, showstopper, stop you in your track. It's going to be the thing that people point out, oh my gosh, I love this about your house or that about your house. But there are also just as many, if not more, details that if me, the builder, the architect do our job well, those details do not get noticed.
Mm.
For example, your light switches should be where they make sense. And if I don't do my job well, or the architect or whoever, and you end up with a light switch in the dead middle of a wall where you want to hang artwork later, well, then what went wrong? Like you shouldn't notice the placement of your light switches, but those are
Yeah.
things that have to be decided to some degree. There's certain things you've got to have. You got to make sure you're meeting code. You got to make sure you've got a good roof line. You got to make sure you know where is this house going to have siding versus where is it going to have brick in the interior as well as the exterior. Well, what if we add a little circular window to like the peak of that roof line above the front door and it's really a window into the attic? So it doesn't serve a purpose, but it will be that added detail that will make the curb appeal. Like even small things like that make that house feel like it's been there forever.
You mentioned that you kind of appreciate like a layered look, not maximalist, but layered.
Yeah.
And that obviously you are pulling in a little bit of like that historic influence, timeless influence. So I'm wondering if there's anything else on the interior side. I don't know how much you work with like antiques or what your balance of that looks like.
We certainly source antiques. One of my favorite things to keep my eyes out for is antique picture frames. And they're so easy to find. A lot of antique markets or, we'll just have like a empty picture frame like in the corner, and so you can just snatch that up and save it for down the road. But then also, go into thrift stores and estate sales and it might be ugly artwork, but look past the ugly cats that are painted in inside and is this picture frame cool? And then you can easily put new artwork in there and add new matting to like make whatever art kind of fit. So adding antiques, whether it be a little side table or a chest or a coffee table. Another thing I love to do is, if you have an armchair that you want to do an ottoman for, well, you probably a matching ottoman. If there's not, you can probably find an ottoman that you can upholster in the same fabric and it'll look like it matches. Why do that if you don't have to? I love to find cane, carved wood footstool with like maybe a rush or cane top.
Mhm.
And then you can always add a little cushion and tie it on, tie the cushion onto the legs with the bow. And now you have this really custom, elevated, thoughtful piece of furniture that's being paired with your brand new armchair. Your armchair is not trying to be old, but the footstool is. So I think that that is kind of the way that I think that layered look comes the most organically. Wallpaper is making a huge comeback, and there's some really fresh, great wallpapers. Don't count out just a classic stripe or a classic iCat. There's a reason that those are classic. Also, like I mentioned with like trim, dentil crown molding is coming back. I
Yeah.
might regret saying this like on record and maybe I'll be wrong or I'm gonna like send everybody to this podcast and be like, you heard it here first.
We'll
But
get
I
that
think
put
a
on
little
a
bit,
quote graphic so that
yeah,
you can have your bragging rights and share it later.
exactly. Yes, please do. More carved bespoke crown especially, but all kinds of trim or paneling out a hallway. That was something we didn't see as much of 10 years ago, and all of that is coming back a lot. But I think that that's such a great way to add interest and detail to a wall or a room. I mean, I do this often where the wall color and the trim color throughout the house is the same color. The
Hmm.
wall gets eggshell finish paint and the trim gets satin. So the trim is slightly glossier. It's also wood, not drywall. You kind of have that juxtaposition of the texture that differentiates the two, but ultimately, the wall is fair and ball slipper satin, and so is the trim. All of that trim detailing down the hallway or with the crown is already adding interest, even if it's not a different color. Hardware, I mean, obviously, like brass is back, baby, and I love it, but it's not the 1980s, 90s lacquered, shiny brass, aged brass, or antique brass, or unlacquered brass, which will show up in the box bright and shiny, but it will very quickly start to weather and patina. And so, I mean, I encourage friends, Instagram followers all the time. Like, you might not be able to hire a designer, but look at your room and be like, what are a handful of small details I could swap? I have always done this, but I'm noticing it more and more is like tassels. I mean, I think like just a fringe tassel. I will hang them over the necks of lamps. So take the shade off, take the bulb off if you need to, slide it over the neck of your lamp, put your shade back on. And now you have this like added simple detail to that lamp that is gonna add those layers. Hang a tassel from a doorknob, hang a tassel from a sideboard in your dining room or built-ins in your living room. If it's not a drawer that you are opening every day, I don't know that I'd recommend that. But if it's a drawer that essentially stays closed until you need the random thing you keep in it, hang a little tassel on that knob and just add a little detail to your built-ins or your entry table or whatever. And, swapping out hardware is so easy. And knobs don't have to just be a plain knob. Like, find one with little grooves on it or little carvings on it. Even if it's brand new, it'll just
Hmm.
look timeless once it's been in your house, like on your built-in for a while.
Well, and I also like that you're addressing that those changes are small and they're very detail oriented, but they still make such a big impact in the overall look and feel
Oh,
of a
yeah.
space.
If you have a console table in your entry and you hang a tassel on the neck of your lamp, and then instead of just dropping your keys on the console as you walk in the door, find a cute little basket for the keys to drop into. You're not even changing your habit, it's just adding another detail.
We have a lot of design conversations here, and function endlessly comes up because that's such a big part of design. But you framed it in such a way that I just want to make sure we highlight again. You said the habit doesn't even have to change with the console table and dropping your keys. And I think that so beautifully sums up what so many people talk about when they are referencing function. It is literally just making sure the design works for how you live.
The habit of dropping the keys, well, now you've just put a basket or a plate or a
Mhm.
box,
Like
something
a catch-all.
easy.
Yeah.
Notice too, like there's another way to address that. And I do this with clients, and I am currently doing it with me and my husband. We only recently got married in October. And so in his bachelor
Congratulations.
pad, his kitchen island was his drop zone. To be fair, it was like organized chaos. It wasn't like the whole island just looked like an explosion, but like the end of his island always had trinkets, mail, and it wasn't stuff that was really even like current, like, of course, somewhere to drop your keys, your chapstick, the mail that you just brought in, but stuff would live there for like months on end. And I can't stress enough that it wasn't really a mess as much as it was this little trinket that I walked in the door with, and I just sat down right here, and now 3, 4, 5 weeks later, it's just kind of still with the group. And so I know when we are moving into our new house, our kitchen island, he's going to do the same thing. There's no way
It's a
to
habit. It's
untrain
in his
him from
routine.
35 years of doing this. So I have already told him, I was like, I am going to find some sort of really pretty basket that is going to sit on our island. We would cook at his place, and it would drive me crazy because like part of the island was not usable, that countertop. So like that way, if we need the space because we're really like rolling up our sleeves and cooking a big dinner, that can just move it. But also, if we have friends over, I can just be like, all right, I don't want your trinkets out here.
I'm
Pause it really
obsessed with
quick.
the fact that you call them his trinkets.
Like
Yeah.
change, like the stuff that guys would like have out of their car or
Yeah. My
have in a
husband puts it on our
pocket.
dining room table, and I'm like, this could literally live anywhere else.
Okay, well, how can I live with that habit where he doesn't have to like completely change who he is, but then it also is going to function for our family better. So if it's in a basket, the basket on the counter is not going to make me like cringe when I
Yeah.
see it. And then two, functionally, we're hosting, we're cooking. It can just get set in a closet or set off to the side. Counter can be wide open for whatever we need it to be. I mean, that's a part of the conversation we have with clients a lot is not just what do you like? What do you not like? What is your vision for your space? But also like, how do you live? Do you have 3 kids and 2 dogs? Do you host the weekly Bible study? And there's, once a week, there's 35 people in our house every single week. Do you have family from out of town? So when they come, they stay. Or do you have family down the street, but your house ends up being the meeting ground? Or what are your habits, small habits? But then also, there's lots of families who are like, we are really big on a Sunday night movie night. Outdoor space is so important to us. So we really emphasize like a screened-in porch. Thinking about how you live in your house and then how you can design with that is so important. Like, don't do something because you saw it in a magazine and it looks good if you know you will not be able to maintain it or keep it up.
You briefly mentioned staying a little bit away from trend because they're not typically very classic. How do you get a client to differentiate between if what they're describing is more trendy or if it is like an authentic thing that they love?
I always try to be a really good listener. And at the end of the day, your house needs to feel like you. The client's house
Yeah.
needs to feel and resemble them, the way they live, what they like, what they want to come home to, and not what my vision was. My goal is to be a really good listener and take the feedback that they've given me and then craft it, put my touch on it, and execute it really well for them. There are absolutely times where a client is like, sold on something, loves something that I'm like, well, okay. And I do have, especially given that I still have work in Nashville quite often. But even here in Birmingham, I have 2 projects right now that are very like modern. But we're still being thoughtful with a lot of, and I don't want to offend anybody, but a lot of builders, will claim that something's modern. And in reality, it was just a way for them to like do it less expensive and faster. So
Yeah.
like if you don't put crown in any room, you can call it modern, but really you cut a cost and you cut time. All the cabinets have the same marble in every single, the kitchen as well as every bath. You really just like ordered a big bundle of this quartz and said, yep. There are times where I'm working on this really modern house right now that there's a ton of attention to detail, even though it's very modern. And so I think sometimes if what a client wants is modern, I don't necessarily try to steer them away from it. I think at the end of the day, what's really important is detail. Still think that if a house is detailed and feels layered, and it can still be minimal or sleek or modern and be layered.
I want to just ask you about you have a shop?
Yeah, so I have a sister business, if you will, kind of arm of my design business. So we don't have a brick and mortar shop yet, but it is an online e-commerce home decor shop. We do sell furniture. We just don't have a space you can walk in and shop in person. But it's called Sweet Home by SCD. It's all stuff that's curated by me and my team. And I landed on doing that. I had the idea years ago that, like one thing at a time, I was like, I know I need to build my design business first before that can support, a home decor shop. But then
Yeah.
also, if I don't have any kind of expertise or name or credibility under my design business, who cares if I recommend coffee table books and boxes and gallery mounts for artwork and stuff? As my design business grew, I kept seeing more and more of a need for that. So going back to our previous conversation where talking about in the early days, I'd say yes to just about anything, even if it wasn't like a great fit. There is a need or a desire for guidance in interiors. Like, not everybody feels as confident that they can pull off their bookshelves or add layered details to their home on their own, but maybe they don't have the budget for an interior designer, or maybe they don't have the project. I mean, I've had people come to me that really don't, it's not a budget issue. It's just that they want help with a handful of miscellaneous. And that's not something I can say yes to and like tie up my time and my team's time. And so over and over and over again, I would get contacted or DM'd or people wanting advice on like styling bookshelves seems to like terrify the masses. And I get it. Even for me, when I have like a wall of bookshelves, I'm like, all right, buckle up, here we go. So I started Sweet Home as a way for people to shop things that are essentially curated by me. So it's my look. If you like my style, then you can shop stuff from Sweet Home and then go look at my website, see how I styled bookshelves. I'm not going to be offended.
a resource, really. You know, we talk about legacy a lot here. And obviously, a big part of sort of like a timeless environment is kind of reminds me of that. Is there anything that you hope that your clients are taking away when they walk into a space you've designed?
The main thing that I really hope that my clients take away from their home, I hope it feels like them. You know, where the process felt easy and not overwhelming and stressful. They look around and they love their home. It feels like something they couldn't have achieved on their own. Feels layered and custom and thoughtful. And it feels like a place we can make memories, but then it's also a place that we're very proud of. One of my favorite projects last year, and if these clients hear this, they'll know who they are. This house was built by her grandfather on one of the golf courses in town and was built in the 90s. So we all have these like horrible images that come to our mind when we think of like 90s construction, 90s home, but this home was done right. It was well built, well thought out, well designed. And we renovated it to bring that home up to like modern day. So the kitchen is much more modern. A lot of the finishes we modernized and stuff, but the home itself, we really didn't overhaul because it was a great house. And I love the fact that my client is the granddaughter of the original builder owner. So her grandfather commissioned, a builder and an architect to build this house that she has grown up going to Thanksgivings and Christmas and summer outings. And so then when it was hers to, purchase from the family, kind of inherit, if you will, my assignment was to make this work for her 2026 modern day family and feel a little bit more like her and her family and less like grandpa. Not just like eliminate the history of that house because it's a history she herself grew up with, and she was like, I would be sad if this like if we gutted this thing to the studs and then it didn't feel like, as would the rest of my family, they would disown me. Like
They
when her
entrusted
aunts and
it to
uncles and
her.
cousins come over there, they'd be like, what have you done to grandpa's beautiful home? And I would love to find out one day that like she has like left that house to one of her kids. That child could be like, yeah, this was my great grandpa's house. And
Yeah.
I live here now.
It's to like put their little stamp on it.
Yeah, and that house wouldn't just get flattened and rebuilt into something different.
Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time to chat today. I could have kept going. I have plenty more questions, but this was really fun to be able to learn a little bit more about you and what you're hoping to leave behind.